Can I start,
Welcome.
sir?
Welcome to ENT student. We are discussing a concept of external rhinoplasty. We'll see how it goes on. Like next.
Introduction. The external or the open approach is a firmly established and the important technique in the rhinoplasty surgery. Its key advantage over the endonasal approaches is to afford the ability to access anatomical deformities by the direct inspection of the nasal cartilaginous and the bony framework. This in turn allows for the easier bimanual culturing of the underlying skeletal components and the application of sutures and grafts under the direct vision.
As you know, external or open approach is a good one. It was done even in the older days. Please be back. I'll just complete the slide and you can start reading it. The advantage is that it can assess the anatomical deformities and we can see cartilage and bony framework separate. As you know, nasal bones are separate and cartilage framework is separate. Even septal bone is separate, septal cartilage is separate. So you can go for bimanual sculpturing. That is, your two hands can be useful for correcting the skeletal components, and you can see it under direct vision. Next.
While not an indication for the external approach, there is also a definite advantage for the teaching where trainees are able to visualize surgical techniques with ease, and this may also be captured satisfactorily with video and photography without the overlying skin and soft tissue envelope entering the view. Limiting surgical tissue dissection to a minimum, as with an endonasal approach, reduces the risk of vascular compromise of the skin soft tissue envelope, and this approach may therefore be favored for the correction of minimal structural, bony, dorsal irregularities and minor tip problems. However, the external approaches need for more soft tissue dissection is balanced by the unparalleled view of the nasal structure.
You can say that it's not an indication for the next external approach. Advantage is for the teaching of the trainees, and it can be captured satisfactorily with the photography and videos, and overlying skin and soft tissue point of view. And the other people, please kindly mute yourself. Hello. Hello.
You're audible, sir.
Yeah, audible. I'll continue. Okay, limiting the surgical dissection to minimum. That is, we don't want to dissect as much. Also, whatever is needed, that only we will be doing. And as with an endonasal approach. So this is an external approach we are talking about. There is an endonasal approach also there for the particular rhinoplasty. In that situation, that reduces the risk of vascular compromise of the skin, soft tissue, which envelope, and also favored in the correction of minimal structural bony irregularities. If the dorsum is involved, dorsum of the nose, for example, the one which you are seeing and touching on the top is involved, you can use this for the minor tip problems. Okay, and the external approaches they need for more soft tissue dissection and for an unparalleled view of the nasal structure. You have to go for more soft tissue dissection. You want to go for an external approach. Next. You can read. Hello, the person who is presenting can read.
Revision surgery in particular, it facilitates accurate diagnosis in cases where the underlying anatomy is not obvious due to prior surgical resection and scar tissue formation. The author personally favors this approach for most reconstructive revisions and where the nasal tip needs addressing in the primary surgery. Incision refinements and surgical technique have overcome some of the earlier criticisms of the columnar scar and delay in the resolution of supratip skin edema, and any potential loss of tip projection can be countered by the placement of support a columnar strut or septal extension graft to maintain support.
So you can have it in, for example, there are sometimes revision surgeries. When external approach is used, it is helping in accurate diagnosis of the cases, and underlying anatomy is not obvious in those type of revision surgeries. Very difficult if it is done with the endonasal approach. So because of the prior surgical resection scar tissue formation, external approach would be a better option. And this external approach is favored by this author, and then wherein the tip of the nose also needs addressing in the primary surgery. You can refine the incisions, and the surgical technique have overcome some of the earlier criticisms of columnar scar and delay in resolution of the supratip skin edema. So you can have refinements of the incisions according to the need, and loss of supratip projection can be countered by placement of a columnar strut. So what they say is a part of a small bone or a cartilage can be kept in the columella so that the graft can be maintained for the support. Next.
The choice of an external approach thus depends not only on the specific pathological anatomical findings, but also on the philosophy of the surgeon. However, in deciding to use the external approach, the possible related sequelae should be considered, bearing in mind that the attainment of the predictable, satisfying result demands the most traumatic procedure. This chapter aims to present some historical aspects and principles of the external approach, outline relevant anatomy, and emphasize technical aspects.
So the choice depends upon the pathological findings and philosophy of whatever the surgeon decides is the final one. And second point, when you're deciding that external approach, sequelae should be considered. So you should keep it in mind about the satisfying results that are very important and a traumatic procedure, because rhinoplasty is a surgery. So when someone asks you what is rhinoplasty is a cosmetic surgery of the nose. So cosmetic surgery of the nose, for that reason, should be as traumatic as possible. And the chapter always helps us in understanding the history and principles of external approach and emphasizes the technical aspects. Next.
Advantages with particular reference to grafting of the nasal skeleton and to specific extended indications such as revision rhinoplasty, the deviated nose, nasoseptal perforations, cleft lip nasal deformities, and nasal dermoids are discussed. Pitfalls related to this approach are outlined with the goal of shortening the long and arduous path of the learning process in rhinoplasty. Mastery of this technique and exploitation of its specific advantages can bring a distinct range of opportunities to the rhinoplasty surgeon.
So as you could see, particular reference and advantages to grafting on the nasal skeleton. So you have to put a graft on that particular nasal skeleton if you want to think in that manner. And specified indications such as revision rhinoplasty. There is always a chance of revision for any surgery, that you should keep it in mind. And the deviated nose, septal perforations. There are septal perforations sometimes, which is a what you say, as I already told you, it will become one of the complications during septoplasty also. And cleft lip and nasal deformities and nasal dermoids, all these things should be kept in mind when you are going to do this external rhinoplasty. So what are the pitfalls of this is that you should be outlining them, and then and as long as a better path of learning in the process in the rhinoplasty should be taken. This technique mastery is needed, and advantages bring a distinct opportunities to the rhinoplasty surgeon. Next.
Historical aspects. Early references to the elephant trunk incision were made as early as the 1920s, and subsequent papers named the approach as the transcolumnar incision, the decortication technique, and finally the external approach and open or external rhinoplasty. As most texts have adopted the latter three terms, we use them interchangeably in this chapter. External incision in rhinoplasty have been used in one form or another in all early descriptions of this procedure.
So you could see, so elephant trunk incision, the was first point. You just show whatever I am talking about. Okay, that also you point.
Okay, sir.
Pointer. Elephant trunk incision should be kept in mind. And in the second line, as you could see, transcolumnar incision. Transcolumnar incision should be keeping in mind. And decortication technique. So decortication technique is one more word. And it is also called as external approach rhinoplasty. So you're not going inside, you're looking it from outside only and treating it from outside. That is called as external approach rhinoplasty. So these three terms are very important and they are used in this particular chapter. Next.
The first such description is believed to have stemmed from India in 600 BC, in which external incisions and an open approach were practiced. The first description of an external rhinoplasty via the transcolumnar incision was given by Reti II in 1934 and subsequently by the Sercer. In 1974, Goodman advocated the external approach and described a modified transcolumnar incision, the well-known butterfly incision. His original description featured all the key points of incision placement, development of flaps, and other surgical techniques. Publications thereafter have mainly served to emphasize the salient points it described. Refinements regarding incision placement, suturing, and surgical technique have largely overcome the earlier problems encountered.
You should keep in mind that it is Sushruta, that is even before the Christ was born, that is 600 BC. Sushruta is very important, and that is this rhinoplasty technique that's very much important. And 1934, Reti and Sercer, transcolumella. You imagine the columella is below the tip, as you know, everybody should imagine the columella below the tip. And then 74, the butterfly incision. It is a Goodman's butterfly incision. And description of all the points. I have developed the flaps for other surgical techniques. Publications are also important in that, and every time you do something, you have to publish, and then if not, you will perish. That is a concept that is there in the world. So you have to do some technique and then you have to publish it. And refinements regarding the incision placement, number 1, number 2, suturing, number 3, surgical technique are all very important. Next.
History and examination. The importance of pre-operative assessment in patients seeking rhinoplasty surgery can be overemphasized. It is beyond the scope of this chapter to discuss full facial analysis in detail, and it is assumed that the rhinoplasty surgeon have a comprehensive knowledge of the relevant concepts. A complete and discerning history regarding the cosmesis and function, any prior procedures, and accurate chronological detailing of post-operative changes is important.
Very important is history taking. Pre-operatively, you have to assess. You have to take photographs from front, lateral view, superior view, all these things. They are very important. They cannot be overemphasized. That means they are a must. Second point is facial analysis. That is, they have got a lot of features like, Nasian, Rhinian, Inian, all these things should be kept in mind when you are doing the analysis of the skull. So all these things, as you know, in anatomy, those should be kept in mind, and you should knowing that. And cosmesis and function, you should be able to tell the patient also that how they are going to be, working out after the surgery. Next.
Patient anxieties and expectations should be elucidated early in the consultation. The evaluating specialist needs to ensure that such expectations are true and achievable, and that the patient's desires are realistic and in keeping with predictable likely post-operative outcomes. Where any doubt exists, sensitive counseling of the patient and referral for the psychiatric review is always prudent, and surgery is deferred pending this.
So you should always keep in mind about, because it's a cosmetic procedure, expectations of the patient. So most of the times they say that the patient will be satisfied, but not the doctor, because we still want to give better output for the patient, because it's a cosmetic procedure. You should keep in mind about all the cosmesis, and you should be explaining everything to the patient. Good consultation, counseling should be given, anxiety should be allowed. Next.
Pertinent decisions about indications for surgery and potential improvements can then be made. Diagnosis of the underlying anatomical deformity essential prior to embarking upon the surgical plan. Inspection and palpation are equally important, particularly when assessing the skin and soft tissue envelope and minor dorsal irregularities. Within these areas, a further subdivision of underlying skeleton support, soft tissue thickness and scarring, and overlying skin texture will help elucidate anatomical and structural deformities.
So first point, when you say, I have learned one thing today, some of the neurosurgeons, they said decision is more important than incision. Okay, you have to decide first and incise next. So that is very important point. And improvements can be made anytime. Diagnosis is very important. Anatomically, should know. Physiologically, you should know. Pathologically, you should know. Surgically, you should know. All these things should be in your mind. Next, inspection and palpation are very important. You have to palpate for the nasal crepitus. And inspection is from all the views, lateral view, and the inferior view, superior view, and all the photographs should be taken. I already told you that. And you should know about the soft tissue envelope, because nose is about soft tissues and also the bones. And then you should have a subdivision of underlying skeletal support. So you should know what is that skeletal support. As you know, are you thinking about the columella, are you thinking about the membranous part of the septum, are you thinking about the this cartilaginous septum, are you thinking about the bony septum, are you thinking about the dorsum, etc., etc. All these things should be kept in mind. And you should know that tissue thickness, skin thickness, how much is the skin thickness, and what about the scarring level that are going to occur, okay, when it is so. So all these things will help to elucidate anatomical and structural deformities. I already told you anatomy and structure is very important, then physiology, then pathology, then surgery. Next.
Intranasal examination may be complemented with the endoscopic evaluation to identify the presence of septal deviations, adhesions, nasal valve problems, and mucosal disease. Assessments with Cottle maneuver is often advocated but can be non-specific and lateralizing the upper lateral cartilage with a probe or cotton bud may be better evaluator. Approach and technique planning is then discussed with the patient and documented. Standard 2D by 3D photography is performed and digital manipulation software can help in discussing potential post-operative changes. This subject is covered in details in chapter 81, pre-operative assessment for rhinoplasty.
So here I want to say, once again I'm going for this, your examination is very important. Number 1 point, intranasal examination. You have to do endoscopy and you have to see for septal deviation. You have to see for any adhesion. You have to see for nasal valve problem. So the inferior nasal valve, as you should know, that laterally is having the inferior terminal, medially is the columnar part of the septum. And as you know, Cottle's maneuver, very important for your examination. In final exam also, they'll be asking about the Cottle's test. So when you are pulling the cheek laterally at the lateral part of the nose, it is advocated, but it is said it is non-specific. So what is that happening? And lateralizing the upper lateral cartilage with a probe or cotton bud may be a better evaluator. So Cottle's test, it evaluates the lower lateral cartilage, is it or not? But here you should have in mind about the upper lateral cartilage. The upper lateral cartilage, if you are pushing it laterally, the probe, it is a better than Cottle's maneuver. What is said in this particular line? Next, 3D technique is useful in planning and documentation. Documentation 2D or 3D photograph can be done. Digital manipulation software helps in discussing the potential post-operative changes. This pre-operative assessment of the rhinoplasty, you just call after your chapter is over.
Okay, sir.
Next.
Indications. As already been indicated, the choice to perform an external rhinoplasty will in many cases be dependent on the training and philosophy of the individual surgeon, recognizing that it is merely an approach to the underlying skeletal structures and not a surgical technique to correct deformity. However, specific indications for the external approach in rhinoplasty may include congenital deformities such as cleft lip nose, extensive revision surgery.
So very important indications for any surgery, you have to know the indications. Surgery means you should have indication. And the perform an external rhinoplasty, as you know, we have seen the internal rhinoplasty and external rhinoplasty. To do that, you should have a training. First point only show. Training and philosophy of individuals. Every person has his own philosophy. And recognizing that it is an approach to the underlying skeletal surgical structures and not a surgical technique correct the deformity. See, external rhinoplasty, internal rhinoplasty, you can, that is only an approach. The way you go is the technique, okay? And surgical technique is different. The external means you give external incision, that is very, very important. Especially you should have indications like last 2 points. So congenital deformities and cleft lip nose. This is one important thing. And extensive revision surgery is also very important. In these things, these two act as a indications for the external rhinoplasty. Next.
Severe nasal trauma, market tip deformities including significant rotation and projection issues, significant septal deviations, especially where eye dorsal deviations are present, situations where assessment of the exact underlying pathology is difficult, Extended applications of the external approach exploit the excellent exposure of the nasal skeleton and the advantages this affords. It has been advocated for subtle perforation repair, access to nasal dorsum for treatment of nasal dermoids.
So severe nasal trauma. So previously we had cleft lip and cleft palate, as you have seen in that previously, and also that congenital deformities like cleft lip nose extensive revision surgery. Next is about the nasal trauma and tip deformities. Tip deformities leading to rotation and projection issues and septal deviations, especially high dorsal deviations. Dorsum, if there is deviation, you can go for this external rhinoplasty, dorsum. And then you have the assessment of underlying pathology is very difficult. You have to open. Open technique is always having an advantage of seeing things easily. So that is very important. So it will not cause any damage. So open means you are opening and seeing, and pathology can be easily removed. Difficulty is not there in understanding. Next, extended applications of external approach. What is the specialty of this? Excellent exposure to the nasal cartilage, nasal skeleton. All these things can be seen so beautifully because you are opening it and seeing it. And perforation repair you can do, septal perforation. Especially septal perforation is a complication of septoplasty. Septal perforation is a complication of septoplasty. And last one is access. You said SS, it's not SS, it is access to the nasal dorsum. That is, you can go through the external rhinoplasty for the treatment of nasal dermats. You have done a case of nasal dermats and that situation. You have to give an incision on it and then you have to open it and then remove it and then close it. Access to the nasal dorsum. Next.
Anatomy. It is important to emphasize salient aspects of the external approach anatomy. Figure 82.1 shows the anatomical subunits of the nose, which are conveniently divided into thirds. The upper third, bony pyramid, consists laterally of the nasal bones and the ascending or frontal processes of the maxilla and the bony septum in the midline. The middle third vault area is formed by the paired upper lateral cartilages inserting just under the caudal end of the nasal bones and their fusion with the midline cartilaginous septum in the T-type configuration.
This is important is the anatomy. Always anatomy is the base for surgery. Anatomy is very important. You should know subunits of the nose. It is divided into upper third, middle third, and lower third. Upper third has got nasal bones, like a book, opened book, nasal bones are there. In the center, there is a septum, bony septum. And on either side of the nasal bones, there is FPM. You should remember APM or FPM, like SPM, your SPM. It is APM, that is ascending process of the maxilla or frontal process of the maxilla. So ascending process of the maxilla, frontal process of the maxilla is one thing which is very important. And bony septum, as you know, septum is there in the midline. The middle third of the nose is called as the vault area. Vault area, right from the vault. It is an important area. Which is paired upper lateral cartilages. So you have got Ulluka patta, that is ULL, upper lateral cartilage. Upper lateral cartilage. Inserting under the caudal end of the nasal bones. So upper lateral cartilage holds the nasal bones. The upper lateral cartilage holds the nasal bones. And then fusion with the midline cartilaginous septum in the T-type configuration. So this upper lateral cartilage holds the nasal bone. That is very important. So as you know, and then they have got the T-type configuration. Next, I can show the picture. I'll explain the picture, please. So as you could see here, number 1 is the nasal bone. So you show the number 1, that is the nasal bone. Number 2 is the FPM or APM. So frontal process of the maxilla. Number 3 is the upper lateral cartilage. This is Ulluka patta. This is hanging the, this is holding the nasal bones. Is it or not? So 1 is the nasal bones and 3 is the ULL, upper lateral cartilage. Number 4 is an upper lateral cartilage overlapping with the this particular nasal bones. Number 4. Number 5 is the lateral crest of the lower lateral cartilage. Okay. Okay, lower lateral cartilage. Okay. Lower lateral cartilage, as you know that lower lateral cartilage, the fifth part is the lateral crus of the crura or crus, that is a wing, something like a wing. Number 6 is dome area within the intermediate crus. Number 6 is the dome area. Number 7 is the medial crus. So you should imagine that there is a medial crus and there is a lateral crus. So 7 is the medial crus and 5 is the lateral crus. 7 is the medial crus and 5 is the lateral crus. You should keep it in mind. Number 8 is the quadrilateral cartilage. As you know that cartilaginous septum. Number 9 is the connective tissue. Number 10 is the scroll region. Scroll region. Number 11 is the shaded area showing the removed nasal bone. Number 11 is the shaded area showing the removed nasal bone. I'm not able to see there. So let us not see that. So that the line that is given is the incision. Okay. Next.
The scroll attachment of the caudal aspect of the upper laterals to the cephalic aspect of the lower lateral or alar cartilages forms the boundary to the lower third of the nose. The upper lateral cartilages thus effectively lie at the slightly lower level to both the nasal bones and lower lateral cartilages. The paired lower laterals form the lower third of the nose, the nasal tip region, and are traditionally divided into lateral, intermediate, and medial crura. It is important to understand that the lateral crura extend laterally but also somewhat cephalically, leaving the most lateral aspect of the nostrils alar margin as being soft tissue alone, devoid of cartilaginous support.
So first point, you show the scroll attachment of the caudal aspect of the upper lateral cartilages to the cephalic aspect of the lower lateral cartilages. So upper lateral cartilages are above and lower lateral cartilages are below. So upper lateral cartilages, that is a ULL, hangs on the nasal bones. This LLC, that is lower lateral cartilages, hangs on the upper lateral cartilage, as you know. So that is the lower third of the nose is formed by lower lateral cartilage. The name is similar, lower third, lower lateral cartilage, simple. Next point, the upper lateral cartilages, they lie at a lower level to both the nasal bones and lower lateral cartilages, as you could see that. Next, third point, the paired lower lateral cartilages form the lower third of the nose and nasal tip region. Nasal tip region, as you know. So tip is formed by two medial crura. Tip is formed by two medial crura. Like you lock your both the fingers, lock your both the hand fingers and then make it like this. That becomes the lower lateral cartilage. The fingers will become the medial crura and your palm will become the lateral crura. The palm will become the lateral crura. As you could see in this particular, I'll try to show it in the video. So when you try to hello.
Hello, sir.
Yeah. So are you able to see the video right now? Picture means once you see that, so your hands are locked like this means this will become the medial crus and your palms will become the lateral crus. That is the lower lateral cartilage. That's how they lie. Okay. So once it is completed, next point is the division of the lower lateral cartilage. Division of the lower, third point only. Lower lateral cartilage is divided into lateral part, intermediate part, and medial part. So lower lateral cartilage has got three parts: lateral part, intermediate part, and medial part. And last point is to understand the lateral crus extend laterally, but also somewhat cephalically. The lateral crus, that is the lateral crus of the lower lateral cartilage, they go upwards also, that is cephalically, leaving the most lateral aspect of the nostrils alar margin as being soft tissue alone. So the lower lateral cartilage, lateral crus, it goes upwards. That is the lower part of the nose has no cartilage support. Lower part of the nose has got no cartilage support. That is very important. Next slide.
The domes and tip defining points lie within the intermediate crust. The medial crural foot plates extend to the lower aspect of the columella and lie just anterior to the caudal aspect of the nasal septum. The superficial musculo-aponeurotic system layer provides a vascular ridge covering to the underlying skeleton with arterial supply derived from the superior labial and facial artery branches and corresponding venous and lymphatic vessels accompanying this. Exposure of all three parts of the nasal skeleton to some degree with subsequent identification of anatomical anomalies and asymmetries is the key advantage of the external rhinoplasty compared with an endonasal approach.
So domes are very important, and tip defining points, they are called TDP. Tip defining points, they lie within the intermediate crust. So dome of the nose lie in the intermediate crust. The TDP also lies in the intermediate crust. The medial crura foot plates extend into the lower aspect of the columella, just anterior to the caudal aspect of the nasal septum. So as you know, your fingers are the medial crura and it go into the caudal septum. Next, the SMAS, that is superficial musculo-aponeurotic system, provides rich vascular supply, that is especially the superior labial artery and facial artery branches, and the venous and lymphatic supply also there like that. All the parts of the nasal skeleton to some degree with subsequent identification of anatomical abnormalities and asymmetries is a key advantage of external rhinoplasty compared to endonasal approach. I think we have reached the final time. Thank you very much for participating in ENT of external rhinoplasty. Keep watching ENT Student.